For the last 2 years, I have made a respectable side hustle reviewing and analyzing reality TV. If you're new here, I dissect some of the gayest media imaginable by talking about producer fuckery, story and pacing, characters, and overall what makes an ideal reality show season. I've watched a lot of reality TV, and I am generally of the argument that when producers get the right formula for a perfect season, there's genuinely nothing like it. It's rare, but it happens. I didn't know if anyone out there liked this show as much as I did when I was a kid, but when I asked whether or not I should review it like I do with my other videos, 84% of you voted yes out of about 1,000 votes, so that was a pretty good indicator that this would be something that people might be interested in me talking about. So today I would like to talk to you about one of my favorite reality shows with a first season so engaging and thrilling that it's almost too good to be true. In fact, it isn't even real. We're going to be talking about season 1 of Total Drama Island. Total Drama Island is a Canadian animated television series that first debuted in 2007. The series was an unexpected hit, so much so that there have been countless spin-offs and even upcoming reboots in the works. However, for this video, we're just going to be talking about the original version. The show is a parody of various popular reality TV tropes, namely the hit CBS series Survivor. In Total Drama Island, hosted by Chris McClean and his partner in crime Chef Hatchet, 22 teenagers compete for $100,000 by completing team-based and eventually individual challenges at Camp Wawanakwa. Much like Survivor, the contestants have the opportunity to vote each other off based on challenge performance. I'm going to analyze this season the way that we're all used to when I talk about real reality shows, and we'll also talk a little bit about the cultural impact of the show as well. Let's start with part 1. The characters. There are a lot of characters competing for this prize, and probably too many of them. So I have taken the liberty of breaking the cast into 3 groups: relevant, somewhat relevant, and totally irrelevant. It's somewhat based on elimination order, but not entirely. Let's start with group irrelevant first. Ezekiel is a homeschooled sexist, Beth is a nerd, Tyler gets hit in the nuts a lot, Cody is a little freak, Justin is there, Katie and Sadie are annoying, DJ is nice and cool, and Noah is gay. Group 2 are characters who are somewhat relevant, meaning that they somewhat affect the storyline and the actual main characters. Jeff is the fun party guy, Bridget is the surfer girl and would probably be the protagonist in any other show, Izzy is an enemy of the state, Eva is an anime antagonist, Harold is another little freak, Lindsay is ditzy comedic relief. And finally, the actual main cast of characters. Courtney is a narc, Duncan is a delinquent, Heather is the only one actually playing some form of survivor, Gwen is our emo protagonist, Owen is fat and the writers really want you to know that, Lashana is everyone's favorite, and Trent is a white guy with a guitar. You would think that a cast this large could get a little overwhelming, and at points that is probably true, but for the most part, it actually works pretty well. The show does a good job of balancing the dynamics between all of the characters, and it really shows once we get to the final episode, but we'll talk about that later. But most of these characters are really well written and unique. Each one feels like they have a special purpose in being there, whether it's to have their own moment to shine or to provide it for somebody else. For example, I love the dynamic between Duncan, Jeff, and DJ, 3 unlikely characters who actually have a lot of fun chemistry with each other. In one episode, Jeff loses DJ's pet rabbit Bunny, which devastates him, but Duncan, who is a selfish douchebag most of the time, takes it upon himself to catch a new pet rabbit for DJ. If there is one critique I could make of the character dynamics, I think the writers went a little too heavy on the whole all the girls are catty and hate each other trope. Most of the time, even before all of the girls head into the same cabin, they're all at each other's throats, and it can get a little tiring. But in that same vein, the show had a wonderful execution of its season antagonist Heather. Heather is the classic reality TV villain who is constantly scheming and manipulating other contestants, and despite all of that, is never actually voted off despite the fact that everyone hates her, except for Lindsay, who also eventually does hate her. It's a little frustrating at times, but it's needed for the tension, and the show balances everything out by consistently giving Heather karmic universe-like punishments, and it really delivers in the end by eliminating her right before the final 2. Of course, not every single character's arc is handled perfectly. For example, Lashana literally gets eliminated on accident by the already eliminated contestants, and it's sort of anticlimactic and dumb, and every few months there's a viral thread on Twitter about how Lashana was robbed, but in all fairness, it does reflect the bullshit that happens in actual reality TV competition sometimes. I want to talk about some other main characters in my relationship section, but before we get to that, I want to take a detour to talk about the host and executive producer behind all of this madness. Part 2, The Crimes of Chris McClean. Like I said, Total Drama Island has a lot of memes that float around in the ether, and if you haven't seen this one before, I regret to inform you that at least like 50% of them are probably canon. I'd go as far as to say that Chris is the actual antagonist in all of Total Drama Island. Chris is a narcissist who feeds off the pain and misery of teenagers. He canonically has killed interns while testing the show's challenges, he literally proposes cannibalism at one point, and he has no regard for anything or anyone as long as it stays in the realm of legality and he and Chef get paid. Chris is a representation of the Hollywood industry and how it churns out the blood of the innocent for profit. He will never be held accountable for any of the bad things he's done, as the gears in the unforgiving machine of capitalism simply keep on turning. It is at this point that I would like to propose that the contestants on all future Total Drama seasons go forward with the process of unionization, because solidarity is the only bearable way to trudge forward in the endless pursuit of getting your bag. Anyway, now that Chris McClean has been properly named and shamed, we've arrived at part 3, the challenges.
Hey Brian.
Yeah.
If I was on Total Drama Island, do you think I would win?
No.
Total Drama Island has 26 episodes in total. Now, this is a traditional animated series, so it's more than par for the course, especially for this period in time. Animated series, especially ones for kids, usually are written in the sitcom, standalone style format, so think SpongeBob or Phineas and Ferb, where a lot of plot happens and then it's wrapped up to the status quo by the end of the episode. But Total Drama Island is a reality show parody, meaning it has to follow the format of how an actual Survivor season would work. And 26 episodes is a lot of space to do that. This is probably not really a fair criticism on my part, however, I'd say the back half of this show suffers from pacing issues due to the fact that they have so many episodes to pad out, and that can really be seen in the challenges and how they progress. For example, the season starts off with a bang, with both teams having to jump off the island's cliff into the circle below without getting eaten by sharks. This is a really solid first episode, where some characters just launch right into it, while others have to take a moment to face their fears, and some of them outright quit altogether, being forced to wear chicken hats on their way back down. This is theoretically an ideal outcome for a challenge because it plays into the votes and the eliminations, and gives us the opportunity to see characters grow and change. I would say this is also true for the Awake-a-thon episode and the Dodgeball Challenge. Even throwaway episodes like the Talent Show Challenge have some pivotal moments for characters, and they're funny enough that you don't mind that the stakes aren't as high. But as the competition progresses, the challenges just turn into straight up torture shit. I forgot a lot of this until I rewatched the series to prep for this video, but we go from characters being scared to jump off a cliff to like having to trap rabid animals or jump out of a plane, and most of them seem totally fine with all of it. You could argue that the time on the island and their willingness to compete is what makes them so much more able to take on these insane challenges by the end, but it's really jarring to see the characters have to eat cockroaches and garbage Fear Factor style, and then in another episode they're playing hide and seek and they're taking it just as seriously. And again, I get they had to pad out the episode count, which is also why two characters, Izzy and Eva, basically come back for no reason at the halfway point, and why there are a couple BS non-eliminations or filler episodes sprinkled in. But I think the most interesting part of the challenges and eliminations is the voting strategy side of things, and some of these episodes just rush their endings and wrap up regardless of what the actual challenge was. Lashana's elimination is a pretty obvious example of this, but DJ's elimination is also thrown at us without much room to soak it in or process the logic. And I get it, it's a cartoon so everything is over the top and slapsticky, but I actually do think these writers are talented enough to pull something off that's a little more complex. For example, Heather manipulating the breakup between Trent and Gwen was really clever and entertaining, and I think they could have gone that extra mile to make the challenges a little more high stakes in that way and a little less, gross. And there's a lot of gross shit in this series, but I'm going to talk about it after we talk about what you all came here for. Part 4, the ships. Like many reality shows, contestants hooking up on set is a very common trope. Total Drama Island is no exception, and it probably broke a lot of preteens' brains when this first aired. And I'm willing to bet that it made a good portion of you realize you were gay, bi, trans, or it awakened something in you sexually, and yes, this is a self-report. Duncan is so fucking hot. So yeah, let's talk about the ships on season 1. Jeff and Bridget is probably the most straightforward relationship here. The party bro and the surfer girl, and there's not much else to really talk about, but it's cute and fun all things considered. Harold and Lashana, I guess, kind of counts. This one is a little weird and unexpected, and some people find it really endearing. I'm not one of those people, but if you are, you do you. Duncan and Courtney is where this shit gets interesting, and for season 1, and we're only talking about season 1, anything that happens after this is not canon in my brain, this is my favorite ship. I think Courtney and Duncan play off each other really well, and I think the boot camp episode where Courtney learns how to break the rules and then is ultimately betrayed by Harold breaking the rules is just absolute perfection. At the same time, I wish Courtney had a little bit more time on the island. I think she had the potential to be just as dynamic as Heather during the actual gameplay, and it would have been interesting to see her continue her relationship with Duncan, who was one of the only ones who went on to actually play to win. Now let's talk about Gwen and Trent. Do I ship it? Yeah, sure, but my whole issue with their arc on this season, and honestly, the issue comes in more with just Gwen's character in general, is that it's really inconsistent. Gwen and Trent clearly really dig each other the whole season, and it's cute and wholesome, but there's these random periods where Gwen gets extremely cold toward him with no real justification. Of course, there's the phobia episode where he forgets to dig her out after she's buried alive, but it would make more sense for her to completely stay mad at him from that point on, instead of, her mood varying from episode to episode. For example, in the finale, she's all excited because she's under the impression that he left her a muffin outside her cabin, and then during the actual challenge, she's telling him off and acting super over it, and it doesn't really make much sense. This is also true in her relation to other characters as well. Like, I really liked her dynamic with Jeff in the episode where they were handcuffed together, and he promises to teach her how to party, and then in the next episode, she's like insulting him. I don't really get it, especially because Gwen is more or less the protagonist of the whole show, but her writing definitely could have been a bit better. Part 5, there's a lot of weird shit in this show, and I guess this is a detour that doesn't count as part of an actual content review, but I just have to talk about it. Now, I get that this series is aimed at kids and preteens, so I'm not expecting top tier level comedy or anything. However, watching it all the way through as an adult, there's a ton of puking. Like, a ton. In detail, for long periods of time, in almost every single episode. Every character pukes. Sometimes multiple characters puke at once. It is unsurprisingly very off-putting, but I don't remember being too fazed by it as a kid. Same with all of the endless fart jokes, but the writers and animators of this show have a weird fixation on, like, stink and mess and body odor, and it's really difficult to look past at some points, especially when you consider that a few years ago, Total Drama had an alternate universe spin-off where the characters were little kids, not the most brilliant idea to begin with, and someone very deliberately snuck a fart fetish fantasy into an episode. Now, I'm not making any accusations here about anyone associated with the show, whatever. Maybe they just think that young kids really love puke and farts, but with the new reboot coming out, presumably geared toward an audience that grew up with the original, it may be best to leave that kind of humor out of it. One other side note on this topic, this show has the most porn associated with it than maybe any other show in existence. It's literally everywhere, especially of her, and her. And sure, it's because the characters, although said to be 16 in canon, are drawn very suggestively and with intention, but, like, I don't know. I stand by the fact that this Canadian production company is somehow responsible for a lot of people's sexual tastes today, and I'd love to see some kind of academic study on that. Okay, that brings us to the finale, and I actually didn't know this because I only ever saw the ending in the US, but many of the Total Drama seasons are filmed with alternate endings, and you get a different one depending on which country you're in. In the US and Canada, Owen won the season over Gwen, and like, I'll give them credit because it's definitely unexpected, and I guess it's fitting because he is, in a way, the most recognizable character of the bunch, but, like, narratively, I think they could have built it up to a little more of a reasonable conclusion because he always felt like sort of the off-to-the-side comedic relief guy. The best episode, though, is actually the bonus one after the finale, where Chris and Chef tell everyone that there's a case with $1 million in it up for grabs on the island. It's so fun watching all of the characters team up with each other and having their own little moments, only for the case to be eaten by a shark in the end. I thought it was super fun and really, really well done. So yeah, that's my opinion on Season 1 of Total Drama Island. If you haven't guessed by now, this video was mostly a bit, and I actually really enjoyed taking a little trip down memory lane for this one. And before I go, if you enjoyed this video or anything you've seen from me so far, I would really appreciate it if you took a second to hit the subscribe button, and if you'd be so kind, give me a follow on Twitter. That's all for me today, you guys, and I'll see you next time.